A wrong glance, a careless step, or even a hesitation could mean trouble. At home, things were no better. The apartment she returned to smelled of stale food and old fabric, a place meant for safety that offered little comfort. The furniture was threadbare, walls cracked, and the single lamp in the living room flickered as if it too was struggling to survive. Her mother, tired and worn, worked long hours at jobs that paid barely enough to keep the lights on, while her father had long left, leaving a silence heavier than any voice. Despite this, there was love here, a fragile thread of care that Tasha clung to, but even that love could not shield her from the harsh lessons the world demanded. She watched, listened, and memorized everything. The sounds of footsteps, the pattern of passing strangers, the way certain neighborhoods shifted after dark. Every small detail mattered. Tasha's survival depended on understanding the city like it was a living, breathing enemy and friend all at once. Sometimes she would sit on the fire escape at night, staring at the distant skyline, feeling both small and invisible, yet determined. Each day brought new tests, a man pushing her for change, kids older and bigger daring her to fight back, the lingering scent of trouble in every alley. But Tasha learned quickly, if you wanted to survive here, you had to notice the smallest threats before they noticed you. She remembered one night in particular, a night that would stay burned in her memory forever. She had been returning from a corner store, bag clutched tightly against her chest, when a group of older boys stepped from the shadows. The first instinct in most kids would have been fear, maybe tears, maybe running blindly, but Tasha froze only for a second long enough to calculate her next move. She dropped the bag slightly, letting the candy and small snacks spill across the cracked pavement. The boys laughed, distracted by the sudden mess, giving her just enough space to slip past, turning corners and ducking into a side street. That was when she realized survival was not about strength or size. It was about thinking, observing, and acting faster than anyone else. And from that night, something inside her shifted. No longer just a scared kid, Tasha began to see the world as a series of moves. Like a chessboard where every person, every shadow, every sound was part of the game. At home, she kept this observation hidden, because showing fear or the cunning she had developed could make her a target. She learned to smile, to nod, to act like she was just another invisible face in a city of invisible faces, all while building a mental map of threats and opportunities. Every alley became a classroom, every stranger a lesson, and every danger a test. Night after night, she walked these streets, growing more aware, more alert, and more determined. The city was harsh, but it was also her teacher. And in those quiet, lonely hours, with only the distant hum of traffic and the flickering streetlights as witnesses, young Tasha began shaping herself into someone the city would eventually have to respect her feared. At home, life was a different kind of battlefield. The apartment smelled faintly of worn wood and the lingering bitterness of yesterday's arguments. Tasha watched her mother move through the cramped space, silent but tired, her hands raw from work and worry. Every gesture carried unspoken lessons how to endure without complaining, how to keep a face of calm when everything inside burned with frustration. Her father's absence left an echo that Tasha had grown used to, a silent warning that people you depend on may disappear without a word. Yet it was not only the absence of protection that shaped her, it was the small acts of care, the whispered encouragements, the times her mother hid her own fear to make Tasha feel safe. These early experiences were confusing love mixed with hardship, warmth tangled with survival, but they became the blueprint for how Tasha understood the world. She learned that strength did not always roar. Sometimes it was quiet, hidden in patience, in careful observation, in knowing when to bend and when to strike. Even as a child, she noticed the way neighbors treated each other, how some demanded respect through fear, while others relied on kindness to survive. She began to mimic what she observed, testing the reactions of friends, schoolmates, and strangers, noting the ways influence and power could be wielded without a sound. At school, she was quiet but alert, never the first to speak, never the first to react. But she took everything in the way teachers favored some students. The hidden alliances among classmates, the invisible rules that governed who was protected and who was left to fend for themselves. Every lesson in empathy, every act of cruelty or kindness was stored inside her like a secret map of the human heart. And at night, when the city outside hummed with life Tasha could never fully touch, she would sit by the window, tracing shadows on the walls, imagining scenarios, replaying conversations, and replaying every small decision she had made that day. She began to see patterns where others saw chaos, learning that life was less about random luck and more about calculated moves. Her imagination became her training ground, a place where she could practice being brave, cunning, and resilient, even if the real world had not yet demanded it from her. Friends at school noticed her quiet intelligence but could not see the undercurrent of strategy that ran beneath her calm demeanor. Teachers praised her diligence, unaware of the careful observation and self-discipline that drove every homework assignment and every test she completed. At home, she learned patience and compromise. In the streets, she learned alertness and caution. And in her mind, she began assembling the first pieces of what would one day become a carefully constructed armor. These formative years were not about heroism, they were about survival, understanding people, and learning to anticipate both danger and opportunity before either arrived. And though her mother struggled to protect her in a city that seemed designed to break children, Tasha absorbed the lessons that would define her: resilience, careful calculation, and the undeniable truth that power, any kind of power, was earned, not given. In the quiet moments before sleep, with the city lights flickering like distant stars, Tasha often reflected on the fragility of those she loved and the fleeting nature of trust. She realized early that if she wanted to protect herself and anyone she cared for, she would have to be stronger than the world, smarter than those who threatened her, and always one step ahead. The mixture of love, hardship, observation, and necessity was forming a young woman who was not content to merely exist. She would learn to influence, manipulate, and survive. And it all began in those crowded, worn rooms, in the silence broken only by the soft hum of the city, where a girl watched, waited, and quietly prepared to take the first steps toward becoming someone no one could ignore. The streets whispered secrets to Tasha, secrets that only those who listened carefully could understand. By the time she was 13, she had learned that the city had its own rules and spoken codes that governed who survived and who fell. On the sidewalks, in the alleys, in the flickering light of corner stores, she began to notice the patterns of power. Older kids moved with authority, claiming space, daring anyone to challenge them. Small gangs patrolled blocks like kings in miniature kingdoms, their laughter sharp and dangerous, their eyes always scanning for weakness. Tasha watched from the shadows, invisible yet keenly aware, learning the hierarchy, memorizing faces, listening to conversations that were not meant for her ears. It fascinated her how fear could control people, how respect could be earned with a gesture, a look, or even a whispered threat. One evening, she followed a shadowy figure down a narrow alley, a man known to the neighborhood as someone untouchable. He noticed her only for a moment, but that moment was enough. He moved with a silent confidence, his steps measured, his eyes always calculating. Tasha felt a strange pull, a mix of fear, curiosity, and admiration. She realized then that power was magnetic. People were drawn to it, but it was also something to be feared. Later, she encountered petty theft, whispered threats, and the small cruelties that often escalated into danger. A group of boys tried to steal the small bundle of clothes she carried from school, underestimating her because of her size. She froze just long enough to study them, noting their reactions, their habits, the rhythm of their movements. Then, using nothing but quick thinking, she slipped past them, letting them chase an empty shadow while she disappeared into the maze of alleys. She knew better than anyone.